Star Citizen's upcoming distribution centers, targeted for an April live release, are a huge addition to the game and personally my most anticipated feature of patch 3.23. Whether you're an NPC serial killing mercenary, an expert in the delivery of incredibly precious boxes, or a cargo hauler looking to earn the big bucks picking things up, then putting them down again.
So, what do you do for a living?
I lift things up and put them down.
Distribution centers will become central hubs of what appears to be every gameplay type and playstyle Star Citizen has to offer and more. But this could be a problem. With such a concentrated player base, it's inevitable players will be interacting with each other in one way or another at these new gameplay hubs. And CIG has gone as far to say that this is indeed their intention.
So a big driving force behind the distribution centers is to really bring players together in all different kinds of ways. So maybe you've got somebody there who's running a delivery mission, and at the same time, you've got a group of people coming in to raid the place and steal a bunch of stuff. They all get caught up together in a whole big mess, and the hope is that it's a fun, exciting, and probably quite chaotic experience.
Some interactions will be friendly, and some, no doubt, not so friendly. In this video, I'm not going to talk about the nuances of PvP or the interpretations of griefing in an open world game, but I will be discussing how distribution centers could be one of the many steps along the road to satisfying the needs of the three major groups of Star Citizen players: the PvPers, the PvPers, and the PvEers, and how distribution centers could be Stanton's PvP slider in disguise. Hello, I'm DTOX, and when I'm not making vaguely humorous, epic narrative-driven gameplay videos, I like to put on my developer's hat, share my thoughts, and deliver some commentary for you, my fellow meatbags, on this game we all know and love, Star Citizen. So if you've arrived at Star Citizen in the last couple of years, you're probably thinking, what the hell is a PvP slider? Enjoy this quick blast from the past.
But if you basically said, hey, you know what, I would prefer to have more PvE than PvP, it would give a preference to the AI flying around rather than a real player. So if there's an AI pirate and there's a real player pirate, it would drop the AI pirate into your instance to fight if you were more towards PvE than PvP.
A PvP slider at some point was imagined as a sort of curve for players to adjust how much PvP they could encounter in the verse. Some people ultimately wanted to be able to control the sort of players they could run into in the multiplayer world, a personal game reality if you will, where players could greatly limit their interactions with overt players who might not have their best personal interest in mind at all times. Fortunately, the majority of the player base agreed this was a bad idea, but there was still a large part of the community who wanted assurances they couldn't simply be murdered callously at the whim of a PKer, aka player killer, for whatever that particular player's motives were. CIG quickly moved away from the idea of a PvP slider and left it in the past, but it is still referenced as a bit of a meme today, usually in response to players who have no desire to interact with other hostile players. In order to help regulate this universe, CIG began leaning more into their proposed robust law system.
There's a few things that we have in the plans right now which will improve this, and it will all start with our law system. Now, when the law system comes into play, that will see pockets of space starting from the size of a solar system all the way to like a small, maybe pirate outpost in the middle of a lawful region. But around that outpost, they are maintaining the law. They create like a law bubble around that place. We will create all of these like pockets of different things that you're allowed to do, things that you're not allowed to do, and then you choose basically which pocket do you want to be in.
So where do distribution centers coming in the next patch fit into all this? I'm going to call them DCs from here on out because I can't keep saying distribution centers. DCs, at least in their initial implementation, appear to be cramming every type of player together in one space, and this already has people reaching for a non-existent PvP slider. And as someone who focuses primarily on PvP, I wouldn't blame them. Who wants to take a delivery mission with the threat of Fanny Buster 42069 flying overhead in an A2, who's got an alternative mission to glass the entire facility? We don't know exactly how these DCs will pan out yet, but in my opinion, CIG needs to create a healthy distance between these playstyles and player behaviors that align with the facility and the company that owns them. One of the best ways to encourage certain behaviors is to provide an incentive. A great example currently is Brio's Breaker's Junkyard, or to a lesser extent these days, Junktown. These are high-risk areas in the game that can provide a high reward, and when these places are available or active, most high-risk, high-reward oriented players gravitate towards them. I hope distribution centers will essentially serve as theme parks, curated content farms that cater to the entire spectrum of player types and playstyles across various different facilities. Organic PvP sliders, if you will, where particular gameplay loops and elements will be incentivized at different distribution centers based on its ownership and risk versus reward profile. For example, I originally envisioned facilities like Greycat Industrial to essentially be a PvE facility, almost a starter facility or theme park, heavily guarded with entry granted on a mission or reputation requirement basis, where you would have your PvE-oriented hand delivery missions, VIP transport jobs, or relatively low-risk, low-value commodity cargo missions, with the ability to scale that up to a mid-level profit margin. With a relatively low to mid-tier wealth potential for visitors to Greycat facilities, pirates and aggressive players would be less incentivized to approach and attack these locations. Instead, they would be incentivized to approach, say, a Hurston Dynamics facility, which operates in the grey area of the law, somewhere between mobsters and corpo rats. This would be where players could expect to graduate into higher risk, higher reward cargo or delivery missions, corporate espionage, and high-paying PvE combat missions, with PvP counter missions generated for players with high Hurston Dynamics rep, or something like that. This facility would offer a mixture of PvE and PvP gameplay with higher risk versus reward incentives. Another facility, such as a UEE facility, would be extremely heavily guarded with high risk reward incentives where all visitors were essentially unwelcome and hostile to the facility, but large amounts of loot or expensive cargo could be retrieved deep inside. When you incentivize certain behaviors, for example, PvP in one location, it frees up other locations that might be PvE oriented from those types of behaviors. This may well be CIG's intention for these facilities in the long term, and judging by what we've seen from the latest ISC, it seems like they're going along similar lines to this. Star Citizen hopes to be one giant multiplayer universe where the game systems and game design should help guide players to the gameplay and playstyles they mostly enjoy. This means it's unlikely you'll start your Star Citizen adventure by deciding whether you'll be playing on a PvE or PvP server, so I like to imagine distribution centers almost as little servers of each, with some crossover in between. Overall, blending players and playstyles together across these new gameplay hubs is a great idea, and while players in Star Citizen are never completely safe from each other, distribution centers could provide a choice for players to determine how much risk versus reward they're willing to take, while providing lots of gameplay options for all players and playstyles. I've had these discussions with my beautiful community live on Twitch. You should definitely come hang out, and I would really like to hear from you guys on YouTube too. What are your expectations for these new facilities? What do you think of their upcoming implementation, and how do you foresee them panning out? Do you see yourself enjoying these facilities as more of a PvPer or a PvEer, or both? As always, thank you so much for watching today, and thank you to my meaty members on Fourth Wall and my subscribers on Twitch who help support my content and allow me to continue doing what I do. You too can become a meaty member for as low as 5 buckaroos, receiving some sweet perks, including a shout-out in every video, while sleeping soundly at night knowing you've contributed to my growing coffee consumption that keeps me going during those late-night editing hours. See you in the next one.